Taja Cheek. Welcome to Performance Space New York. I'm so happy to host Office Hours with the Rising Artists Foundation at UMAW. I'm the artistic director here. I also make music under the name Rain primarily, and I'm on the Rising Artists Foundation board. I want to quickly orient you in the space for a quick moment, and everyone in Zoom land, I hope you can visit soon. Performance Space New York is an interdisciplinary performance venue that was founded in 1980 as PS 122. It has an incredible history as a school and also a site for activism, particularly for collectives like ACT UP that were organizing against the AIDS crisis. We have 3 spaces. Our large theater, which is currently housing an exhibition by Kejong Thomas, which you can come see any day of the week. But not now, sorry about that. A smaller theater, and then this space, which is called Open Room. It's a yearly rotating exhibition space that houses community programs like this one all the time. Please check out the calendar on the website. And I also just want to say this current installation is called the Memory Vortex Inn. There's some information about it right by the entrance. And it's organized by a collective called Black Contra-Futurism, one half of which is Foremother, a musician you might all know and love. And with that, I'll pass it along to our lovely Ben. Sitting right in front of me, thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Ben. I'm one of the founders of the Rising Artists Foundation. Just to give you a little bit of info about who we are, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We build grant programs for musicians as well as resources such as like educational programs like this. And we are working on building a nonprofit digital distribution company and record label, which we'll be rolling out soon. So everyone follow us on Instagram, on our mailing list, and come talk to me afterwards. But thank you to UMAW for doing this with us. Thank you for our amazing board member Taja for providing this space, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks so much, Ben and Taja. My name's Joey Neve De Francesco. I'm with United Musicians and Allied Workers, or UMAW, I'll be calling it for the rest of the night. I'm going to be moderating our panel tonight. I'm going to give just a quick overview of UMAW, a quick roadmap of what we're going to be talking about tonight, then we'll have our panelists introduce themselves and get into it. First, I had a request from the folks running our live stream to let everyone on the live stream know that there is a chat in the Zoom where you can submit questions. So if you're watching the live stream, you can go in the chat, interact, ask questions. That'll come at the end. We'll kind of alternate questions between people who are here and people who are watching the live stream. So UMAW, United Musicians and Workers, we are a musicians advocacy group or workers center or union. We started in 2020, right as the COVID pandemic was starting. Our goal is to build collective power within the music industry for music workers, to give power back to music workers in this industry. So we've run campaigns on issues such as streaming, right? Advocating for better streaming rates through our Justice at Spotify campaign, through a bill that we've written along with Congresswoman Rashid Tlaib's office called the Living Wage for Musicians Act. We've done campaigns on things like getting artists pay up at festivals, like the South by Southwest Festival, where we've successfully won raises for the past 2 years for thousands of musicians. We've done work on the BDS movement and Palestine solidarity efforts, such as also at South by Southwest, getting that festival to divest from the weapons industry and from the US military. We've done promoted fair ticketing legislation at the state and the federal level, and a number of other efforts. So we'll keep plugging this, but you can go to weareumaw.org and become a member. Right, we're only as powerful as how many people we have involved in this to push back on this industry. So that brings us to today, our current panel. This is the second in our series with Rising Arts Foundation called Office Hours. First was on booking. This one is going to be on publishing and masters and royalties, which can sound like sort of a technical subject, and it can be really confusing, which is why it's so important for us to know this stuff. We're going to be trying to break it down as much as we can today. Coming from UMAW, I feel like we should just say before we get into these technical aspects that all of this stuff, right, how royalties work, how they work in the industry, how we as musicians interact with them, is all historically contingent and can be changed, right? This is stuff that comes out of somewhere, it's not written in perfect stone somewhere, and musicians can and have changed this stuff before. Just quick example, right, in the 40s, a big musician strike over what was then the new technology disrupting the industry, vinyl records, right? There was still this battle between musicians and labels and broadcasters between who was going to get the profit from this new technology. Musicians went on strike for 2 years, right? Hundreds of thousands of musicians with the AFM. They won that strike, right? And created a sort of new kind of royalty with vinyl records where the broadcasters, labels had to pay into a fund administered by the union that for a long time was the biggest purchaser of live music in the world, right? So you had this new technology, got money from it that musicians demanded through a strike, went into a fund to pay live musicians, right? They created a new type of royalty. Today, similar efforts, right? There's a bill we're supporting called the American Music Fairness Act that would for the first time pay performers based on radio play. You might say that's crazy, it's not already happening. It's not. The US is one of the only countries in the world where performers are not paid directly for radio play. Promoting that, again, the Living Wage for Musicians Act, which would create a new kind of streaming royalty, we are also pushing. So again, it's important that we know all this stuff so that we can advocate for ourselves at an individual level and also be prepared to change it and advocate on this collective level as well. So now we're going to get into it to understand this system as it is so that we know how to navigate and change it. I'm going to begin by having our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some of our questions here. I'm just going to hand it over to you, Zach. Say hello, say your name, what you do in the industry.
Oh, there's a wireless mic.
There's
That's easier to
Should we
pass.
switch to that?
Sure. Hello?
Yeah, let's switch it on.
Hello? 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 Hi. I'm Zach Weinstein. I run a publishing company based here in Brooklyn called Sunset Songs. We just established ourselves this year in partnership with the Brooklyn label Mexican Summer. Before that, I've done 10 plus years in A&R and publishing, and also was an independent artist manager.
Hi everyone, thank you to UMAW and Rising Artists Foundation. My name is Mike Lawrence. I'm a lawyer. I've had my own firm for about 12, 13 years. I do entertainment law. I also do small business law with this law firm called Covey Law. And nice to see a lot of familiar faces from over the years in the room. Looking forward to answering the questions and talking a little bit more about royalties.
Hey, I'm Shilpa Ray, and I'm a musician and songwriter, and I think I'm here to learn.
Hi, my name is Hannah Champagne. I'm a senior project manager at a record label called Ninja Tune. I've been working at record labels for the past 10 or 12 years in a variety of different roles. So excited to contribute and talk about kind of how the labels play into all that.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. To start, I think we should just define our terms here that we're going to be talking about. So the different types of royalties that we are looking at. So Mike, as a lawyer, right, you're negotiating these contracts. I thought you could start us off. Can you give us a quick rundown on publishing, master, performance, mechanical, digital performance royalties? What do these mean? What do they mean for musicians?
Sure. So I know most of you have these sheets, which I didn't create. I think UMAW created them. But I'm going to go through the rundown, how I have it sort of organized in my head. So there's two types of copyrights. There's the copyright for the composition, which is when an artist writes a song, lyrics, music, that is the underlying composition of a song. So that's one copyright. Another copyright is the actual recording. So when you go in the studio and record the song that you wrote, that is the recording. So those are the two copyrights. There's two different ways that those two copyrights can be exploited generally, and I think of it as performance can be one way, and sale can be one way. And when I say performance, I mean the end user just passively listening to music. If you're in a bar or a restaurant, in your bedroom, wherever, and somebody's playing music for you over the airwaves or over any kind of device like that, that is a performance. A sale is if you go on the computer, buy your music through Apple Music, go on a site where you're a subscribing member, that's a sale. So we have a composition, we have a recording, we have a performance, and a sale. So performance of a composition plays out in that what that's called is it's not a mechanical royalty, but a public performance royalty. So if you as an artist sign up for a performing rights organization, what they do is that they do surveys of all the songs played over radio, all the songs played on Pandora, wherever, and they do a calculation and they pay out the publishers, the songwriters. And so that is how the performance of a composition gets paid out. And again, an artist would go to a place like ASCAP or BMI to sign up as a songwriter and a publisher to ensure that they would be able to collect those monies. If you are, now I'm thinking of a sale of a composition, how that would play out is if you have a manufacturer records, the composition is on the sound recording. So every time you make a copy of a record, that is what is called as a mechanical royalty. And so as a composer, again, there's the main way you get a mechanical royalty is you sign up for a mechanical licensing collective. They are an organization that issues blanket licenses to all of the different DSPs. And so when the DSPs play music, when music is played over those DSPs, every time that happens, a copy is made in the ether, and so composers collect mechanical royalties. Today, the rate for a mechanical royalty is 12.4 cents per copy, and so that is a recent increase from the 9.1 cents that was before. And in addition to that, the latest increase is now tied to the consumer price index, which means in the future, going forward, each time there's a raise in inflation, the mechanical royalty rate will go up, which has not happened before. So now we're gonna go to the recording copyright, and if we go to think about what a performance of a recording copyright gets you as a artist, now we're talking about recording artists, not composers. What that performance gets you is something that's actually pretty new. Because as Joey was saying before, for radio, for the longest time, royalties were only paid to composers. And so in 1995 or 1998, they changed the law so that recording artists also get a performance royalty, but only on digital platforms. So when there is a performance of a sound recording now over digital platforms, the recording artist gets a royalty for that, and that's called the digital performance royalty, something of that effect. And so now when we go to a sale of a recording, what happens there is if you're an independent artist and you don't have a record label, maybe you just go to a digital distributor. And so when you make sales through a digital distributor, what happens is the income comes through them, they take their percentage, whatever that is, and they forward the rest onto you. So that, in a sense, is your royalty as an independent artist. If you are on a record label, you've negotiated a recording contract, and so what you are paid as a royalty for the sale of a recording is dictated by your recording agreement. And so how a lot of recording agreements are structured is that the artist, as an artist, you get paid in advance upfront. And so as the sales of your recordings happen, those sales are recouped against the advance that you were given initially. So yes, if you're on a label, you don't actually get a royalty from sales of recording until you meet that advance figure. So that generally is the basic structure of the two copyrights and the ways that they get exploited in different revenue streams. Just so that I don't think, so I'm gonna go back. For a composition that is performed, again, you go to ASCAP BMI to sign up as a songwriter and a publisher to get those monies. For a mechanical royalty, and again, that is the sale of a composition. You sign up for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and they handle the royalties for the DSP blanket license in the US. But any other mechanical royalties you get through Harry Fox or Music Reports Incorporated. The distribution of a sound recording takes place through this company called Sound Exchange, and you could sign up either as both. You could sign up as a label. There's like a label portion, and then there's a recording artist portion. And so the performance of a sound recording you get through Sound Exchange. And then the last sort of quadrant is the sale of a recording, and you could either get that through your digital distributor or your record label via your recording agreement.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. Very thorough rundown. Yeah. So Mike went through, again, publishing and recording royalties. Within those, you can look at your sheets too, the performance, mechanical, digital performance, master recording revenue. We're going to probably keep coming back to all these things. It's a lot to kind of take in. Within what Mike said, right, we were talking about PROs, we're talking about BMI, ASCAP. I was hoping we could take one other step back to define in terms of like, what are these organizations? What do they do? Where do they come from? So maybe you, Zach, working in publishing, could you give us a quick, explanation of what are PROs? What was Harry Fox? What are these organizations, and what do we do with them?
Sure. Is this on? Hello? Yes, hi. So, performance rights organizations, which you would know by their brand names BMI or ASCAP, traditionally were nonprofit organizations that did all the laborious, meticulous combing of data for television broadcast, terrestrial radio, you can submit set lists as an artist who is affiliated with a PRO to account for how often your music is performed publicly. Public venues, bars, restaurants, concert venues, anywhere that is in the public space need to have a license in order to play publicly music that is copyrighted. And the way that they do that is by issuance of a blanket license. So you're setting up a bar, you and your partners are like, what kind of music should we play? If you don't want to play royalty-free music, which sometimes can be great, but you want some really good curated playlists, you need to go to ASCAP, BMI, and secure a blanket license to allow you the rights to perform music publicly. As far as Harry Fox goes and Music Reports, they were for-profit organizations that take a portion of your royalties and collect typically mechanical royalties in a lot of the places that you can't find yourselves. They have started to go out of fashion with the creation of the MLC, which was created out of the Music Modernization Act in 2018. Made the collection of mechanical royalties a whole lot more transparent, a whole lot easier for songwriters and publishers, And they traditionally, the MLC, handle solely DSP mechanical royalties. Congress in 2018 decided a stream on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your streamer of choice is both a performance, a public performance, and a copy, a unit, as Mike pointed out. So in order to calculate that, Spotify at the end of the year has to send all of their data to the MLC and the performance rights organizations, and they come through and they match based on all the streams, and they generally calculate off of their total revenue, because how can you account for the amount of subscribers your platform has versus how many times a particular song is streamed versus was it an ad-supported stream or was it somebody who was paying for the service. It's a really complicated formula, and the creation of the MLC made it a whole lot easier for publishers and songwriters to collect those royalties. And Harry Fox, they may have direct deals with places that perform music publicly that constitute both mechanical and a performance royalty. Say, for instance, your song got synced in a Peloton playlist. Anytime that your song is performed there constitutes the same kinds of royalties. And unless ASCAP and the MLC has a deal with Peloton, oftentimes Harry Fox might, or Music Reports might. So there's lots of nickels and dimes everywhere when it comes to your royalties, and my opinion, it's best to get affiliated as best you can across the board.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, we got a brief rundown of what these organizations are different kind of royalties. Maybe, Hannah, you can answer this. If you had an artist who is not yet working with a label or a publisher, how do you go about just on the most basic level making sure you're covered on this stuff? Just how do you sign up? Who do you sign up with? How do you make this decision just to make sure you are signed up and getting these royalties?
Well, I don't know if I can speak to every single one of the areas. I do know from working with a variety of artists, something like ASCAP versus BMI, that is, I think there are subtle differences, but there are differences, and I might not be the best to elaborate fully on that, but a lot of that I think has to do with how much you're performing live, how much you're doing more in the recorded space. Each one will have, slight differences where if you're performing a ton of shows, they're going to be the better option. If that's where you're making like a bulk of your money and spending a bulk of your time, you'll want to get with, again, do either of you know off the top of your head which one would be better for live ASCAP or BMI?
Well, what I can tell you is that recently BMI switched to a for-profit business model and ASCAP remains a non-profit, should that tilt you one way or the other.
As far as, I've worked with some distribution companies through record labels, but working, with a DistroKid or a CD Baby, things like that, I believe that they, and I think it would be good to kind of ask them how they break down and report things. I think the more questions you can ask, the better informed you'll be and know if there are spaces outside of what they cover that you should be looking towards to get further, if are they working with Sound Exchange? I think it's, most artists I've worked with seem to sign up directly there because you can just have better control of what you're reporting and have a better idea of, just kind of how all these areas work. And I think that if you are the kind of artist who may not go the route of working with a record label, the better informed you are is going to help you benefit and, like you were saying, kind of pick up every piece of royalty that you can everywhere. I don't know that I have the best understanding on the rest of the areas. I've worked with places like Harry Fox on doing like when people record covers, and those tend to be more just kind of one-to-one, one-time payments versus the more mechanical and ongoing royalty collections that you can do through them. So I'd be happy for anyone else to add a bit more if they'd like.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks for walking us through it. So I think, folks are looking at this sheet. I'm learning a lot of this stuff too, but it sounds like, right, for performance royalties, as an artist, you're working on your own, you sign up with a PRO, right? Performance Rights Organization, that's gonna be BMI or ASCAP. Mechanical royalties, you wanna register the MLC, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. Digital performance royalties, you're gonna be signing up with Sound Exchange, right? And then master recording revenue is gonna depend on if you're distributing it yourself. If you are, that's DistroKid, TuneCore, that kind of stuff. Or, if you're working with a record label, they're kind of taking that part of it. So,
One thing I'd love to add about publishing royalties, if I may, the single most common self-inflicted error I see is that songwriters are not registering or affiliating as both a songwriter and a publisher. First, when it comes to performance royalties, the whole of a royalty is seen as, we'll call it 200%. 100% is considered the writer's share, and another 100% is considered the publisher's share. The reason why this was created in this fashion was actually to protect songwriters from publishers, whereas historically back in the 20s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, publishers would hire songwriters on staff and would take all of their royalties, even though it is the writer's intellectual property. That's why this was created, so that it protects the writers. So no matter what kind of publishing agreement you may get into, if you're self-published, unless it says within your agreement that your publisher is allowed to collect your writer's share, only you are entitled to collect your writer's share of publishing royalties. That being said, you only can collect mechanical royalties as a publisher. So a songwriter themselves cannot affiliate with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. You have to go affiliate as a publisher. So it's really crucial if for independent artists who are self-published, want to collect all of your royalties, make sure you affiliate with a PRO of your choice as both a songwriter and a publisher. Otherwise, you're missing out on virtually half of your performance royalties.
Yeah, I know this seems like a lot of steps too, so sometimes as an artist what you could do is, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more later, the difference between a publishing administrator and a co-publisher. So you could sign up with a publishing administrator who won't take a percentage of your underlying composition. What they'll do is take a percentage of the income that comes in, and their job function is that they will sign you up for the PROs, they'll sign you up for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and they do a lot of the things that maybe might seem intimidating, like if you have to sit down and follow this flow chart and go to like each website on there to sign up individually, so that's also an option.
Publishing royalties are so complicated. I've been in publishing for 12 years and I'm still learning something every day.
yeah, it's very, very complicated. So to break it down to kind of like the artist level and what this looks like for us, Chilpa, I think when I was first playing music, and even now, like I don't know, 13 years later, this was all extremely mysterious to me. Kind of had no idea what was going on.
This discussion is a treat.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody sat me down when I was younger and told me how all of this works, because you can make a lot of mistakes trying to make it right, which I did a lot when I was younger. I'm actually under CSAC, that's my PRO. They've recently been in the news over YouTube. I like working with them. I have a good agent, and we have one-on-one contact with each other, which is good. But I think they basically do the same thing, or serve the same function, if you're looking for a PRO. So after you're done, like, making the music that may or may not be the hit, what do you do with it in order to earn the money back? And yeah, the more information you know, for sure, it's good, but it's also good to keep in mind what you want to get out of it too, because a lot of putting creativity into numerics can get sad. So just make sure, you know, when you're entering into a contract with anyone that you are very thorough. If you don't understand like legal speak and stuff like me, ask somebody who can explain things to you, because it can be a very scary place at times. So that's my input.
And what was the process for you, like first, you know, were you putting out music for a while before you're like, oh shoot, I should register this? Did you know what to do immediately? Like what was that process of like figuring this out? Like, because I think for a lot of us it was very haphazard, or it still hasn't happened fully.
You know, I started out as a solo artist. I still consider myself a solo artist. But I had, you know, the attitude of just being like, can I even write a song and perform it, you know? And it seemed like people around me had a better idea of what this was than I did, so they would just tell me, oh, then this is gonna happen, then this is gonna happen. Instead of me having the interest of figuring it out for myself, which I think would have been the better path. Yeah, like I said, I wish we had this. This is so helpful. Yeah, I don't know, I guess I came up at a different time where you didn't really talk much about business if you were a creative, and those two worlds didn't really combine, and we were still like selling physical copy, streaming wasn't a big thing yet, you know, and now it's like we live in this whole other world, and money is scarce, and you have to know what your rights are and like where the money's coming from in order to survive and to keep the engine running for your own project. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I think we've now established the part as much as we can, and you know, the time of this panel, what these royalty structures look like, how to sign up for them. In the Q&A we can get into more specifics if people want to get into it further. Now I want to move a little bit into what the role of a team, a label, a publisher is for the artist. So as we've gone over, you can do this stuff on a basic level yourself. Like you can go on the websites of ASCAP, BMI, Sound Exchange, etc., and sign yourself up for these things, or TeamCore, or DistroKid. But there's all of these world of other partners you can work with if you so choose to. We've kind of, I think, already hit on why artists might choose to do that, right? Just the sheer complexity of this. Yeah, I want to make this to you and Hannah. Why do you think artists choose to work with a label or a publisher in this, and what is the benefits, I guess, that a label or publisher can give to artists through navigating the system? Is it solely navigate the complexity, or are labels better able to negotiate these deals? Why would artists choose that?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing I've always said is before you get anybody, get a good lawyer, and they're always gonna be the best friend and best help you can get in navigating any further relationships or contracts you can be involved in. I think especially where it comes to kind of where masters and publishing come into my world, it's a lot to do with, of course, how it's, everything's being funneled back from DSPs, physical sales. We can, help collate all of the bits and pieces you're getting on radio, overhead play into an overall royalty structure and payout. And also when it comes to sort of the exploitation of, on our side, it's usually of the masters, which we don't mean exploitation in a negative sense in this case, but finding different ways to generate that revenue outside of the different structures that exist that we've talked about, but getting music used in advertising. I think like Peloton is an interesting company that's come up because they function somewhere between a DSP and like having your music in a commercial, and they go through, and we have people on our team who go through with them and reach out to if there are additional writers or additional people who would be collecting on the publishing of your music. It's teams who can help navigate these much more difficult spaces. It takes a lot of time and knowledge that is beyond what I even know. It's also, I think when you're getting into volume of selling, thousands plus records, more than what you might be taking on tour, more than what you might be, giving to the record store down the street. It really takes that master side in particular, and a label's job is to elevate it. We have more. It's great to hear having a relationship with someone at CSAC or with an organization, or if you had a good relationship with someone at a distributor. It's being able to really take the art that you make and use that sort of industry label knowledge that we have to really sell it, figure out, what are the best things that you have to offer. One of the best parts of my job is getting to talk about what the story is behind your music, what the process is, and then taking that and translating it to people who will want to purchase a record, want to put a song on a playlist. So it is, having those robust teams that go beyond just making sure that, money is collected, making sure that music is delivered to a platform, and that sort of the, master side exploitation in my realm, that we're making sure that it's going as far as possible. But I also think, I work at a label, I love doing that, but I think that there are, depending on how motivated you are or how knowledgeable you are in that more business end of things, if you have good lawyers, good managers, good booking agents, it is something that you can do to really sell yourself. But I know so many artists that, that is not what they are there for, and they would actually rather have absolutely nothing at all to do with that. And that's where, having people who are in your corner at a label or a really good distribution deal, a lawyer, anyone, can really help to push things forward, and can also explain to you what a lot of these things mean. And, there's people on our team who all they do is just go through all the, everything that's coming in, siphoning that out. And also, with working with the label, there's the money that's put into recording the music, there's money that's put into packaging, and then there's money that's put into marketing, and that usually comes, you'll get in advance, and then the marketing budget will come beyond that. And that's something that I always advise artists to pay attention to, because that's someone spending money on your behalf that, depending on what kind of deal you have, there's 360 deals. I've only ever really worked at places where it's 50-50, so the label gets half, you get half. But if a label starts spending money in places that you don't approve of, or things that, spending too much money on music videos, things like that, that's going to affect you at the end of the day. And so that's why, even if you don't want to be that involved in the business side, at least be aware of what's being spent and on whose behalf, because you can have a label that is on top of every piece of performance right organization collections. They can make sure they're collecting all the money from DSPs, but if they're not, if you're not paying attention to and aware of what else they're spending to, be on a billboard, things like that, that's something I think artists should definitely be aware of, because all that money that's coming in on the master side, all that can be much harder to get back if you're not seeing that your money is being spent well on your behalf. And also with the kind of master and publishing side of sync agreements and usage in commercial, people who are fighting to push those prices up for you, who are creating that value. If someone comes and says, I'll give you $1,000 to use this song in a Target ad, you want people who are fighting to push that up for you. Otherwise, you're going to be starting from a lower base in that realm, and it's all just trying to create more value of your music and arts, and making sure that it's being, sold to people in a way that is not going to leave you with a fantastic record release. Everyone's listening to it, but you're not seeing anything back because that money is all being spent elsewhere.
Oh, agreed. Yes. Beware of the dinners.
It's important advice. Something to take away from tonight. Yeah, thanks so much, Hannah. Maybe, Zach, if you want to give us, if I can start on the master side here, why would an artist choose, what is a publisher? What what does it mean to work in publishing, and why would artists choose to kind of do that? What is the benefit?
Well, at the most basic level, everybody needs their royalties collected. It is physically, mentally, emotionally impossible for you to go out on the street and collect every single royalty, look under every rock, and get what you are duly to be paid for your intellectual property. So a publisher, and there's a multitude of different kinds of publishers, goes out and collects all that money for you, looks in the places that you wouldn't think to look, has relationships in places that you may have not immediate access to, and further to that, helps you further develop more intellectual property, songs. At the end of the day, whether it's a record label or an attorney or a booking agent or a publisher, I think a lot of times the humanity of it all isn't spoken enough. And ultimately what you're looking for, in my mind, is a partner. Whether they're going and collecting your royalties out wherever they can find it, whether they're manufacturing and helping design your album and distributing it to stores, or whether they're sitting down with you and reviewing line by line your legal agreements. Ultimately, you want to be able to sit across from the person and be like, I trust this person, they believe in what I'm doing, and I know what their role is, and frankly, those people should be eager to walk you through all the processes. And I think you were right that it didn't used to be so typical that the business would be out on the table. Ultimately everyone's here because they love music and they want to lift up great artists, but I find that good partnership always comes through transparency and tough conversations. And when it comes to publishing, the core of it is about collecting royalties. A publisher can sync your music just as much as a record label can. And people tend to forget that, largely because when they hear publishing deal, they think, oh, you're gonna get me syncs. But in terms of breaking down the different kinds, you could have your pick. If you don't find that partner or immediately, you can go to a more democratic DIY tech platform like a Song Trust or a TuneCore, and they will administer your rights for you and collect it on your behalf. But you may have a harder time if you have a question or you find a discrepancy in your statements getting somebody on the phone. Going to a larger publishing administrator, you might have a little bit more access. And they will do all the same things. They'll collect your royalties across the world too, and be an advocate for what you do. And then there are more creative leaning publishers, which is what Sunset Songs does, where not only are they providing the services of administration of your rights, but they are frankly just active partners in your everyday career as creatives. They are A&R people, they are marketers, and they perhaps look at the creative process maybe through songwriting, maybe more so than recording. And how can we provide enough opportunities, come up with enough good ideas, collaborations to enhance, develop your craft, and lift up the art that everyone believes in.
Thanks so much. Mike, kind of the same question. You're, as a lawyer for artists, you're coming at it maybe from a different angle of negotiating with or against, in some cases, a label or publisher, advocating for artists to get the best possible terms. When you're talking to your artists, how would you frame this question of what is the benefit of working with a team or with a label, whether they should do it or not? How would you talk an artist through that when you're negotiating with them or for them?
Yeah, I think it depends what kind of artist you are and what your goals are. I think, so if you go from like the biggest label out there, so I think the benefit in that scenario is that you are gonna have a partner hopefully who's gonna invest a lot of money into brand awareness and to getting your name sort of to a place where it opens up doors for like a larger fan base. In terms of maybe an artist who's not as ambitious, it would be a partner who is reliable, more of like an artistic partner. In terms of the actual deals themselves, I look at it in different ways. Like I look at, so what's the money like, when does the contract end, and how the contract is moved forward. Those are, to me, the three basic questions. And then there's like another question of like how the terms are defined, which is also important, which also gives meaning to those three larger questions. So in terms of money, obviously more is better, but in some circumstances, I've had clients where we've put our heads together and have decided to take less money in a scenario where they were offered a in perpetuity deal, which is where the label owns the masters, and so one particular client I had didn't want that, and so we put our heads together and went back to the label and was like, we'll actually take less money to enter into a licensing deal, and they went with it. So, that's one question, and then there's a question of options. Some record contracts are longer. I typically like to have a shorter number of albums involved. That way, if the partnership isn't working out, you could get out of it earlier. And then there's a question of how the contract moves forward. So I feel like a lot of artists don't understand that really a recording agreement is, all the options are really with the record label. So if you have a 4 or 5 record deal, what happens is that, it seems like security, but really it's not, because the record company has the option after each album to drop you. And so it really is, for the artist, it is a 1-by-1 album deal. For the record label, they have the power to keep you locked in for longer periods of time. So that's why I say that shorter album periods are better, but then also it depends on how the power the record companies have to define what is an album they can accept. And so the way that is defined in the contract will be the difference between an artist who gets stuck between album 1 and 2 because the record label doesn't accept their delivered album, and an artist that can more easily move through their contract periods and get out of their contract eventually. So those are some of the things I think about, and I'm sure we'll touch on other things later on.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike. And Shilpa, could you tell us a little bit about how you've made the decision over the course of your career to work with a team, work with a label, or not at different points? I know for myself, that's changed and shifted. I think that's a lot of musicians. If you've been doing it for a while, you've worked with a bunch of different record labels, maybe different publishers, etc. But kind of listen to what everyone says. What's informed your decision, and what decisions have you made and why?
Sure. I guess now most of the business is DIY. It's coming from the artist, and it's controllable by the artist as well because of streaming and putting your work up for streaming. So you're probably more in the position of building a team around you rather than going to somebody to convince them to put you out. It's more like how I see it now. But yeah, I've definitely gone through periods where I worked without a label, worked without a publishing agent, and it's fine. You still get opportunities to put your music out there. You can still put your music up for streaming. And then there's points where, I will develop a relationship with somebody where I think it fits and I need help doing it, because you need to build a team. You can't do everything by yourself. So I like the combination of the two. I totally agree with having shorter contracts with record labels, because you just never know what's going to happen. And it gives you more autonomy as to, how you want to market yourself and market your music. Another thing to be careful of is taking large advances, because an advance is not payment, it's a loan. And I know a lot of bands they do, have that on the table. I also experienced that for a short period of time, like 10 years ago. I don't think they've recouped yet. I have no idea at this point what happens. But yeah, when you start getting into like the double-digit grands, you don't know what kind of marketing campaign that they put that into. You don't understand like where is this money going that they keep wanting to recoup. So that stuff is really important. The smaller the advance, the more return you're going to get at the end. And I believe Jack White also said on an interview that he never took advances for any of his albums. And now he's a record plant and a label. So yeah, that's something to be very wary of for sure.
Cool. Thanks for that rundown there. Kind of on the same thread, I feel like it's probably useful for artists listening here and at home, now that kind of this is overview, are more specifically, what are these red flags to look for? So people have mentioned on the panel a few things. I think it'd be useful to like define these, perpetuity agreements, right? 360 deals, let's throw another red flag, like handshake deals. So things to avoid, and maybe we just pass the mic down, or whoever wants to begin with this. What do you see as the biggest red flags for us to avoid?
Life of copyright. Avoid it at all costs. If you really need the money, no. Life of copyright's the one
What does
thing
that
to look
mean?
at. So, in the U.S., the life the term at which your copyright of your song, I believe it's still life of the songwriter plus 70 years. Am I correct?
I think it's 90.
Is it 90 now? Okay. So you are entitled to publishing royalties on your intellectual property for your entire life plus another 90 years. At which point it enters the public domain. I don't think Happy Birthday is there yet, but Mozart certainly is. Anyway, essentially you can be in a negotiation with a publisher, and when you're talking about material points on terms, they will say, well, I want to be in business on these copyrights for the life of copyright. So that's until you die, and then 90 years after that. I've seen instances where it makes sense. More often than not, just avoid it altogether.
So yeah, I think that's a good one. And I'll say I personally don't like deals where there's a recording contract and obviously you can't be signing away your copyright. Even if it's a licensing deal, I don't like the deals where you're also giving up publishing in addition to the recording copyright. A lot of times I think there's very few places, if any, that do the recording side of it and the publishing side of it really well. I think you're better served to hold on to your publishing for a couple of reasons. I think the biggest reason is that if you're getting an advance for the recording, you're probably not going to see any money in terms of royalties for a few years, even if that album does well. So the monies that you're going to see quicker and more often are publishing. So I would do everything possible to hold out and not sign away your publishing in terms of a co-publishing deal, which is a publisher owns part of your underlying composition. But definitely, if you're presented a deal where in a recording agreement you're also giving up some publishing stake, I would avoid that.
You're gonna put me out of business.
Are you a record label too, though?
No,
Okay.
I partner with a record label. I'm a publisher. It's okay.
It's spicy,
No,
There are
I
some
tend-
contradictions.
I tend to agree. If you don't, and I think it applies to a record deal as well. If you don't need a record deal, if you don't need the financial resources, you do not need the advance on your royalties, there's no reason to give up your rights until it gets to a point where, like, if I want to grow this, we need resources. That's one thing I think all artists and songwriters can agree on is that they historically have seen record labels and publishers as a means to get resources to continue to make your craft. It's about the timing, I think, and it's about, you know, for how long you're giving your rights away. It was just playing.
I mean, yeah, there's real contradiction in the industry. Can you pass it down, Maj? I mean, I think you shared some, Jill, with any other like red flags that you would mark that you've come across, or you know, maybe you wish you'd said no to, or that you've seen in the industry.
But can we all agree that perpetuity is a really bad word?
Yeah.
Is that a unanimous? I think so.
Can you tell us what that means? And just
Forever,
for-
endeavor.
Or like the perpetuity contract that you're signing
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. And anyone who says that they're gonna make you a star, don't fall for that one either. That's a really bad one.
Particularly with a cigar.
Yeah, don't fall for that.
So many things. I mean, I would agree again, taking big advances. You know, anyone who does that, I'm like, that may be the only money you ever see. And, you know, I'd also say like putting, you know, I was talking about marketing budgets, but so if you don't need a ton of money up front, ask to put a little bit more into the marketing budget because that'll help to actually amplify what you're doing. And usually the marketing costs can, if you're, so I don't know a ton about the different types of deals, but like I said, I think a 50-50 deal is a good thing where usually it is only around your recording music and the publishing and about what is spent to manufacture, promote, and distribute your music. A 360 deal, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but usually is going to encompass your live, your merchandising. I'd also say don't give up any merch rights. If people want to take your merch rights, then that's just another area of money that you can make that you really don't need them for. So yeah, so anything that starts to, within a recording contract deal that starts to encroach in other areas of revenue for you, I would say avoid those. And ideally avoid people who want to be too many things to you. Somebody who wants to be your manager and your booking agent and release your music. I mean, maybe at the beginning having a close friend who kind of helps with all that is good, but when those start to become significant and differentiated revenue streams, you first of all want someone who can be an expert in each area, and also people who, I've worked with people who are managers and booking agents, and so they are only prioritizing those, like the live area of an artist at the detriment of promoting record sales and getting music out there. So keeping people a little bit separate can help to make sure that every area is looked at equally and by someone who is focused in that area.
Great, thanks so much. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So another thing I just remembered is there's a term called cross-collateralization, which it sounds bad, just like in perpetuity, and it usually is. So what that means is that, so if you have a recording contract and there's like 5 albums, if album 1 does really well and like 2 and 3 are a bomb, and so you're like 70,000 in the hole or something, then and the next one does like 200,000. So instead of making 200,000, it's like 200 minus 70. That's the concept. Which you're not going to really get stricken out of most recording contracts, but where it's a little egregious is when there's multiple recording contracts and they put a cross-collateralization clause in there so that the second contract can be reached by the deficits of the earlier contract. And if it's a publishing deal, which has nothing to do with the master, then there's cross-collateralization between the recording agreement and the publishing agreement, which is definitely, those last two are known as.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for that rundown. I didn't actually even know about that one yet. The other one I mentioned was handshake agreements, which is what it sounds like, just informal agreements without a contract, which can seem great and like DIY and free and stuff. at first, but you have to consider and think ahead that in 10 years, is this person with some money who's offering to put out your record, the handshake deal, who seems chill and cool, still going to be that way in 10 years? Or in 20 years, do you want them being able to make a claim for your music forever, right? There's a reason we have contracts, there's a reason like you have a union contract or contract for these things, right, to protect you as much as it is for, you know, the potential for a label to exploit you. You also have to be in there to make sure that you can use the contract, negotiate it so that you are not being exploited. And handshake deals are also definitely something to avoid where it is possible. Sort of all of these, this kind of brings back to right at the beginning, brings us to that place of the tension between the individual and collective here. Often if you're a young artist and you're presented with one of these contracts, you don't have a lot of money for lawyers and stuff, it is extremely difficult to say no, right? You don't know what you're looking at, you're negotiating by yourself. So, I mean, this is the sort of stuff we're working at UMAW to have a collective that negotiate baselines for these sorts of things so that you're not totally alone. A sort of comparison that comes to mind for me is like student loans, that you're 18, taking out a loan for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have no idea what you're doing, and then 10 years later you're still stuck with the consequence of that, and that can be these. So hopefully, you know, this panel today, just learning about this stuff in general, it can help you know, get rid of some of those practices. But I think, you know, going at this alone is not something anyone should do, right? At minimum, you should be talking to other artists and speaking with a lawyer. So it's almost time for questions, but one that came up sort of before the panel that a few people asked that maybe we can just do kind of a rapid fire down the panel before we move to questions, is people who are at the level in their career where they want to be working with a publisher or a label, but haven't been able to secure that yet. So you had a few people asking just what are now in 2024 publishers, labels looking for, how to approach a publisher or label from a place of, you know, strength and not just having to accept whatever's thrown at you. What kind of advice would you give to get the attention of building these kinds of teams?
I guess, you know, it's not one size fits all in any situation, but I think more often than not, trying to avoid putting the cart before the horse. I can't tell you how many artists I've talked to over the years where they're maybe thinking about how they're going to get something out in the world and how they're going to market it and how it's going to be perceived before they've made it. And I'm much more as a fan of music and you know, as a publisher and an A&R person, I want to hear what you're up to, and I want to dig in, and I want to talk about it with you, and you know, because that's where the ideation comes from, and the visions for the future comes from. So I think just trying to remind yourself not to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, this isn't an area I have too much input on, but I just, from like experience, I would say that the artists who I've seen who've gotten approached by labels and publishers are probably at a point in their career where if they didn't want to go that route, they probably don't need to. It's just that they're getting the attention and they're sort of making a name for themselves. And so at that point, a lot of times it's a decision that partner could sort of do more to like get them to an even better place. So that's what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I guess it's just really important to know that the product is coming from you. It's not the outside, so just know that you still have power, you're still in control. And I have to remind myself of that all the time, so that's good to know.
I guess I was thinking of this a bit more of like what is a label or a partner looking for when looking for new artists to sign, and just kind of the things that I know that we look at labels. It is a lot of stats and things like that, but things you can have a little bit more control over versus like how many streams you have on Spotify is just kind of what sort of community are you building with your fans, and how are you engaging with fans, showing that, you know, you have, even if it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, 1,000, however many people who really believe in what you do and are showing up for what you do. I think that's something that's more and more important, because those are the people who are going to help you, help a label, help everyone to further spread what you're doing. And I think having a really well-defined social media presence both helps to bring together those fans, and also is a good thing for a label to see that you're not really averse to that, and we're not going to have to spend a good amount of our time convincing you to post something, that you have a point of view and a perspective, and that you know how to speak to an audience with that. So I think that, you know, of course making incredible music and, you know, that is very important, but those other kind of side things are what I think helps draw people into wanting to work with you.
Great. Thanks so much, Erin, for those great answers. Before we go to the Q&A, let's give a round of applause for the panel. Extremely up everyone here and listening on the live stream. So for the Q&A, we're going to go back and forth between the room and people on the live stream, right, if we have questions. I think we already have some of the live stream. And for the panel. So I think we can start with the room here. Any questions? I saw you first in the back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I you know, understand the concept of the being, you know, both the publisher and the, you know, the songwriter to collect your fees. I'm just wondering, because I've just felt like I hit some roadblocks when registering for like ASCAP. They want, do you have to register an LLC or form of business? Or can you just kind of use your social security number, type in a...
You shouldn't have to have an LLC to be able to establish a...
They're not looking to write separate checks that people, you can just put in your own information.
You can,
essentially.
essentially you can make up your own name for your publishing. It's called a designee.
Okay.
And you don't need an LLC in order to form.
Oh, it doesn't have to be registered to a state or anything.
They'll likely still ask you for your tax information.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, just think of it as an imaginary company.
Okay.
So I failed in my moderator duty, and we needed that set into the mic so the live stream could hear. But maybe you could just repeat the question and your answer, and then we'll use the mic for the rest.
Yeah.
The question was, when setting up a publisher with ASCAP or BMI, do I need an LLC in order to do so? And the answer is no. You can set up a publishing designee without an LLC.
Yeah, something to that. So if you do a publishing designee, that's doing business as. So more than likely you will have to register that with whatever state you reside.
So yeah, then would there be an LLC behind this somewhere? It has to be some kind of business that's registered with a state? No.
It doesn't have to be.
Not even used up it, but as you as an artist, does that eventually come up either, or you're just getting paid as an individual entity? Like,
so there is a time. There might be a time where you as an artist might want to create a business entity. It's called a loan out corporation, and so a lot of artists do that. Enter into the recording deal as an LLC to have like an extra layer of liability protection.
yeah.
But you don't have to do that for the publisher.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you have to use a DBA, or can you just use your own self-proprietary information?
I think you could use your name. Yeah.
It was asked, do you have to use a DBA?
Yes.
Yes.
You don't have to use a DBA. You could use your name.
Yeah, great. Anyone else on the panel have any other input in that? So I'm just going to switch to one from the live stream. Someone asked, how does clearing samples and permissions for cover songs work? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, so there is, so if you want to record a cover, you have to do what is known as a compulsory license. So you just go, it's literally a form you have to fill out and to send to the composer, the original song, saying that you intend to do this cover. And there is a nominal royalty that goes along with that, but it's a fairly straightforward process.
Just from my very limited knowledge, but it's, doing a cover can be a lot more straightforward, but when doing, using samples or interpolations of music, you will usually need somebody who will get in touch with the publisher of whoever is composing what you're sampling. That may then involve a simple one-time payment. That could become where publishing gets a little more complicated, and that's where someone else is taking a percentage of your publishing. So I might, sample someone's work and they want 5% of the royalties on that song. So it's a much more complicated world than what I'm knowledgeable of, but that is somewhere where you would need to get licensors and additional publishers involved.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. So with a sample, there's again 2 copyrights. There's the composer, the songwriter, and then there's the owner of the recording, which a lot of times is a record label. So if you want to clear a sample, you have to find, which is the hardest part actually, you have to find the songwriter. And I've done this a number of times and I hate it, but somehow you find the songwriter, you send them an email, you kind of gauge how expensive it would be to clear the sample. You do a song and dance and you get to a number and hopefully clear that side of the sample. And then for the recording, you either have to find, if it's an independent artist, the recording artist, or in most cases it's a label. And that's even trickier because it's like, if it's a big label, they've been sold and transferred so many times that you have to send sometimes 10, 15 emails, but when you finally get to the right person, it's the same song and dance, you've come to a number, but in most cases, if you settle with one number for one, then you have to settle for the same number for the other. That's normally how it works as far as samples go.
I'd like to add one thing when it comes to publishing and samples. More often than not, you won't have to pay a publisher or songwriter an actual fee. What you will do is you will negotiate actual splits on the new work, on the new copyright being formed. So Herb Alpert has a percentage of publishing of Notorious B.I.G.'s Hypnotize for the life of copyright. And you would negotiate either directly with the songwriter or with their publisher. But generally when you're sampling, they will have a piece of that writer split forever.
Cool, thanks all for that very thorough breakdown here. So let's go back to the room. Any further questions in here? I'm gonna go with you because you're right here and I can hand you the mic.
And that's why you sent me the front. My question is more so like, what are some guiding principles for like new directions or new models in these industries? Like as we see like publishing and royalties becoming more of like a known issue, whether it's Taylor Swift or LeBron, or like on a big stage or a smaller one like a few years ago, like financials going down and artists having to improve. And then on the other side, you see like Web 3.0 platforms like Merlot or Stone, right? These ideas coming to fruition. I want to ask, like, what are your maybe some guidelines or maybe just guiding principles for artists who maybe are not looking to reinvent the wheel, but are looking for alternative models to go maybe either instead of this or alongside it?
Are you asking specifically about publishing royalties?
Yeah, like, I mean, let me see, I just want to make sure I get it right. Yeah, publishing royalties and then also recording like autonomy and stuff like that.
So when it comes to publishing royalties, there are a plethora of new technologies that have, over time democratized how you collect and administer your own rights. One being Song Trust, which is owned by Downtown Music Holdings, and TuneCore, where you can go register your music. By the way, if you do use Song Trust, make sure you set up a publishing affiliation because they will not do that for you. I do think that Web3 smart contracts, not necessarily NFTs in the way that we saw a few years ago where people are selling weird apes. But I do think that smart contracts, when it comes to royalty tracking, one day may become a game changer, but it'll take the whole industry to adopt the technology in order for it to happen. And frankly, the Spotifys and the Apples aren't incentivized to be more transparent about how they're paying their royalties. So until that, technology becomes more widespread, I'd stick with Song Trust, TuneCore, or traditional publishing needs.
I'll speak on the recording side. So, I think over the years the contracts have gotten a lot better. I haven't seen one of the old school sort of big label recording contracts in a while, and those were very cumbersome to get through, and a lot of legalese and different things that just made it expensive for the client to have a lawyer look at. Now I think the contracts are a lot better in terms of it's in a way simpler. It's a 50-50 split in most cases. More contracts are exclusive licensing deals, which are better than the in perpetuity deals. So I think there's progress has been made, but I think contracts could still be written better. And it stands out when I get a recording contract that kind of leans in that direction. But I think, it's a process, and hopefully it gets better over time.
I think as far as utilizing more Web3 based platforms like Nina or Audius or other like music streaming and sharing platforms, there's a big barrier to entry right now, I think, with a lot of record labels because those platforms haven't yet developed royalty reporting and accounting that fits in with what a lot of major record labels are using. And so they're all very interesting to me, and there are certain occasions where we make allowances because the audience fits for an artist so well. But generally speaking, for a lot of bigger labels, the way that they're accounting just isn't quite up to speed with what we need.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also add just kind of if there's the sort of you answer this question on the future of these things is collective action. It's regulation. It's raising the floor in this, which is only done not through individual signing of contracts or not, but is done through collective means, building power in this industry. So mentioned at the beginning again, the Living Wage for Musicians Act, to create different kinds of streaming royalties. It's sort of like whatever platform there is that pops up, unless we have a counterweight, a counterpower to that is music workers, in my opinion at least, right, it's going to simply reproduce the same power balances, the same inequities. And so it is our task to, know how the system works, and I think we've done a great job of laying it out tonight, but whatever new platform there is, I think we're gonna have the same task, which is we need to build music worker power in order to get our fair share of that platform and of those profits. Let's do another one in the room. Anyone? How about you? All right, I'll give you the microphone.
Well, I actually had multiple questions, but because Mike just mentioned, you mentioned that in your experience, a lot of contracts on the master sides have been 50-50 splits between labels and artists, and I've heard kind of like anecdotally over the years that tradition, long-running tradition in independent music is kind of like slipping, and that some independent labels have started taking more than that, and I was wondering like if there's anything you guys could share about the extent to which you've seen the 50-50 split on the master sides held up by bigger indies currently, and how you've seen that change.
It doesn't quite reach. I think you. Oh no, here we go. I'll see.
All right. So one thing I've seen in those contracts is certain labels, the bigger indies will build in more like on the expense side, or they'll build in like some kind of administrative fee, which is almost like makes it then not a 50-50 split. So I think probably see more of that, different ways through adding more expenses to the mix and maybe like having some sort of a fee where it becomes less of a 50-50 split.
Yeah, and also the recoupment structures. I'd be, keen to look at how much is recouped off of each section of your recording contract and what, if you're recouping 50% on something or 100% on another thing, there's a lot of maneuvering there.
And that there, in your contract, Shilpa, is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I've mostly seen 50-50 on the master side. And sometimes it still makes me a little bitter at times. I'll admit to that.
Yeah, same for me, though. Yeah, I haven't signed a contract in 6 years or something. Yeah. All right, let's take one from the live stream. I have a question that is, how do companies like The Orchard, Cobalt, AWAL work? Do you recommend those? Things to look out for, some general thoughts on VC and music.
There's one outlier in that group listed. I will say Cobalt is a publisher while The Orchard and AWAL are distributors. I think you have to get in touch with somebody at AWAL or The Orchard in order for them to distribute your music, and essentially at its core they will distribute your music widely across all the DSPs for a fee. And within those companies, you'll have a rep that maybe will be talking to some of the editors who are building out curated playlists. I think when it comes to digital distribution, fairly straightforward. Cobalt, definitely a publisher.
I'd say that those are kind of the kinds of distributors, like you're saying, they're ones who don't function like a label, but they might provide an advance like a label. They also do deals with tons of record labels and distribute lots of record labels physically and digitally. So if you are someone with a very robust team and you don't want to work directly with a label, something like The Orchard or AWAL could be a good option. They provide label services, which is essentially playlist pitching, promotion. They can put together marketing plans, things like that. But they're usually a little bit less hands-on and usually would not have the same kind of 50-50 split or anything like that as a label. So as we were kind of speaking, if you feel like you want to put together a big team around you, and those could be good options. If you're just still kind of getting started and wanting to release music, you will either probably not be accepted to work with them, or you will fall away through the cracks of their systems because they're just dealing with very big labels and very big artists on a direct level.
Great, thank you. Let's go back to the room. So I have a question. Gio, let's give you the mic.
Thank you all for being here. It's really great to get a better understanding of this stuff. I have so many questions, but I'm going to stick with one really short and then a real one, which is, if you're already with ASCAP, BMI, or what have you, SAG, and you want to switch, is that a possibility? How easy is that? And then my other question, everybody always says get a lawyer. This might be directed to you specifically. It's like the first thing that they tell an artist to do, like make sure you have a good lawyer. But I'm curious at what point in the process it really makes sense to get a lawyer. Is it like when you have the contract in hand? Lawyers' fees can be extremely expensive for independent artists, even just like a personal meeting, like for the first time meeting can be a lot of money for some artists, and I think a lot of people forego that because they're not sure when the right time is. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about when and how you go about like finding a good entertainment lawyer. Sorry, you too.
Yeah, thank you. So I would say usually when you're presented, it doesn't happen that you're just presented a contract. Usually what happens is there are some preliminary discussions. Maybe you're presented with a deal memo, which is like a 1 or 2 page summation of what the long form agreement would be. So I think that's probably a good point when you have those initial conversations and when you're presented with the deal memo to reach out. I would talk to a bunch of lawyers. I know I could speak for myself. I don't usually charge for initial consultation. And probably a lot of lawyers, you could find a lot of lawyers that don't. So I think, if you find lawyers that want to charge you for that initial consultation, feel free to sort of like shop around. But that's the advice I would give is just when the first inkling of any kind of business contract being presented to you, you don't have to wait until you have the contract in hand. It's nice to talk to someone before then.
As far as switching PROs, it is possible. I'm not sure what the notification window is, but you do have to notify them in advance, largely because publishing royalties are collected on a lag. So when you do switch affiliations, in all likelihood, your current PRO is still in the process of collecting and calculating certain royalties. So you'll notify them in advance, and then you can reaffiliate.
Alright, let's do another around the room. Who else had a question? Still have a few. Let's go to. Oh, that's it. You choose. That's more fair.
Okay, hello. First things first, Mike, we won 7-2. Yeah, I know. And then second, I have two very short questions. Number one, when you're interacting with an artist or an artist is interacting with you, what is the percentage that when they walk up to you, you walk up to them, they say, hey, I have the song trust information, I have the publishing information, I've had all of that, here, let me take a look, versus like, oh, I have to teach them through all of this, you know what I mean? Like, getting them acquainted with it. And the other question is, sometimes some recording contracts will have, be like, you want to do a string ensemble in your next record? Great, here's a in-house string ensemble, or here's an in-house producer or whatever. How does that get wiggled into mastering, the master recording royalties as well, if there is?
Thank you for the update on the game.
Thank you.
So, I usually don't have clients coming up to me saying like, oh, I have all this stuff done. Usually it happens when it needs to happen, and I'm more than happy if it's an existing client to like walk through stuff like that, like free of charge. It doesn't happen all that often. As far as the second part of your question, or your second question, it sounds like what you are describing is sort of a session player arrangement, which would not necessarily be in a recording contract. It would just be maybe the artist who's recording the record on their own, deciding like who they want to play with. Even if it's suggested, to me it would be, or maybe there's a way that the record company would pay for it if it's their suggestion. But I haven't seen that sort of specific thing in a contract.
I hinted at session players, yes, but I was also referring to like music producer, like an in-house music producer or like an in-house songwriter, what have you. What would that relationship be between those 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 parties?
So in most cases I've seen the producer is, it's more that the artist works with the producer and they have an agreement worked out between them, and then, so once that agreement is worked out, then the second part of it is then when the recording company comes into play, the recording contract might have a stipulation where the recording company pays the producer. There's a reason why it happens in that order. which is, you know, probably a little too complicated to spell out in this setting. But essentially what happens is the producer wants to get paid from the first sale, and the artist typically doesn't receive money from the first sale because they're still in the process of recouping. So in that scenario, then me as a lawyer would ask the record company to then pay the producer from the first sale, and that's worked out sort of through the negotiation.
It depends on the kind of deal that you're talking about when you're signing to a record label, but sometimes your advance is inclusive of your recording budget. Other times there will be a portion that is an advance against your royalties, and they will have a separate recording fund. Ultimately, I would hope that you're signing to a record label and they're working with you because of your brain, and they're looking for your feedback. They'll bring ideas, and then when it comes to the negotiation and figuring it out, that's between you and your team, your producer and their team. If the label had somebody else they work with they suggested to you, ultimately it's a group negotiation. But I think that, you know, you and your A&R hopefully are having a discussion about, oh well, I'm working with this X producer, I've always worked with X producer, and your producer may want to bring in some people, tap into your recording budget for that. It's a budget, for sure.
Yeah, I just usually that would probably come out of an advance. There might be instances where the label says we have a studio, we have a mastering engineer, we have these people who you can work with, and it might be at a more discounted rate, but that would kind of still remain separate from being built into a contract. But also when you're working with musicians who are playing on the record who aren't necessarily part of the band, or you're a solo artist or producers, that all comes into label copy, which is laying out who's the writer, who's the lyricist, who's the composer, laying out everything that kind of goes into publishing, and that is then all taken into account on DSPs, and when you're publishing anything, goes into liner notes, things like that. That is like the information of who is contributing to the recording, and then that, again, all kind of filters out into these various spaces.
I've experienced this, and they're all right in what they're saying. It's just they just get paid up front for their services, like you would any producer.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Did you have a follow-up?
I mean, I remember hearing stories of like, you know, and like, say for example, like, mixing engineers getting royalties for songs after they've done work on it, or same goes with mastering engineers or something. Although I don't know if that's a practice that's still done today, I'm not too sure. Oh, here.
It definitely still is a practice, and usually it is because depending on your recording agreement, you may not have enough upfront cash flexibility to pay your producer or your mixing engineer, at which point you negotiate with them and you say, can you take a lesser upfront fee or advance on future royalties in exchange for a percentage point? It's important to be clear what kind of recording agreement they have, because a point typically means something from what is called a PPD deal, and essentially is 5 percentage points, versus if you're in a 50-50 deal, a point means something completely different. But the practice is still very much alive and well, and it's largely because you may not have 40 grand laying around to pay somebody.
I don't think you need to use the word may in that.
Thanks so much. So we got about 10 minutes left, so we're gonna try to do, we're gonna do a quick lightning round, try to get through all the questions in the room. Saw some folks over here. Do you have a question? You, yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Natalie. So earlier we were talking about how it's preferable for shorter option periods generally, and there was quick mention of how if you get caught in something longer, what the label defines as like an accepted deliverable could kind of decide whether or not you can get out of something. So what should like an artist look out for in a deliverable clause?
Anyone want to start, Mike?
So the easiest things to look that I look for is the distinction between so the better clause is technically satisfactory, but then there's another clause that says commercially satisfactory. So commercially satisfactory to me is very ambiguous. It's not really clear what that means. Like one's definition of what is commercially satisfactory could differ widely from other people. And so I think in a lot of instances where a label chooses not to release what is delivered to them by the artist, they lean on the commercially satisfactory language. And so I think to the extent that you could put in technically satisfactory, which just means that it was recorded by somebody very competent and they did all of the correct things that a person of their stature would do in a studio, that would tend to satisfy that requirement in my eyes. So that's why I prefer that language as opposed to commercially satisfactory. There are some other things in a contract that I would shoot for in terms of making sure that that scenario doesn't play out. One thing you could also put in is a key man clause, because in a lot of recording contracts, the reason the artist is sought after by the label is they have a relationship within that record company. And a lot of times, record companies get sold, transferred, and then the person who really championed that band in the recording company is no longer there. So the artist will like fall through the cracks. So I think a key man clause in addition to the technically satisfactory might be a couple of things that will help that scenario.
Also, just note that different labels have different expectations from their artists too. Like a lot of labels can be very loose and give an artist a lot of artistic freedom, and then there's other labels that don't and would correct. So that's also language you should look for in a contract when signing to a label, is what their expectations are, or if they're expecting you to represent them in a certain way. So.
Yeah, I would always aim for the language to be as mutual as possible, as often as you can. Ultimately, they're a business partner. I think we can all agree we can technically look at it, whether it's a publishing deal or a master's deal, as a loan with interest, but it's a little bit more in that you're getting a business partner. So as mutual as the language you can get, I think would be helpful. As far as particularly around publishing, one thing that is largely dead, but is an immediate red flag, is something called an MDRC clause. And historically, when you would sign a publishing deal, this is how they would trap you into an option period. It's called a minimum delivery release commitment. So not only are you expected to deliver some compositions to your publisher in exchange for the advance, but it is also expected that those would be released on an approved label. That is not, thankfully, as prevalent as it used to be. A lot of publishers, particularly ones that seek co-publishing arrangements and take a more creative approach, will have some sort of delivery requirement, but won't mandate that it has to be released within the term. That's one of those.
One more thing as far as the minimum commitment, which I've seen. I've also seen it limited by the number of songs you deliver in a publishing deal, and then also the length of those songs. So, if I've been in a situation where I've been looked at those contracts and I knew that my client did not release songs of the length that was required. So obviously, that's something you want to look at very closely.
Actually, I don't know on the panel.
Yeah, you are.
I feel like artists should also talk to each other more. Like, I always talk to other artists on labels, and like, people have different deals for all sorts of reasons, and like, that's that, but you can also get a lot of information just from talking to someone and just like understanding what their experiences are. And I just want to like encourage that as a practice. Like, I do that, people do that with me, and it's really important for like musicians to keep like information sharing. Like, that's always really helpful to know, like, okay, this artist got blocked from releasing their record. Like, why did that happen to you? What was that like for you? But I think people sometimes get scared about talking, but we should all be talking to each other like, a lot.
Yeah, thank you for that. 100% agree. With contracts, with shows, festivals, I've definitely played festivals where a month later talk to another band that does kind of like at the same level and they're getting paid twice as much or something. There's a weird taboo on artists talking about money together, but we need to raise all of our money up. Okay, we have like 4 more minutes. We'll try to get some in. You gotta run the back, right? You're helping, so I'll make sure you get to ask yours.
Thanks, sir. Again, thank you all for this talk. It's been super informative and illuminating. Actually, I want to jump off of Joey's last question before the Q&A started, kind of dovetail on that. I'm wondering if you can all talk a little bit about I was going to say the dark side, more like the gray side of this for artists who don't have the momentum for whatever reasons they're conscious of or not, don't have the momentum they want and would need for royalties to yield real benefit for them. A lot of artists who don't have labels and select press, the right kind of press, and due to that don't have a booking agent and management in that chain way. For those artists, licensing seems like diminishing returns for them. So besides making accounts just because that's the right thing to do, so you can get the bare minimum for royalties, what would you say to those artists who I think we can all agree are actually proportionally the majority of artists out there?
Can I take this one?
Yes.
Yeah, that feeling of not having enough momentum or not having representation for your work can be like really frustrating. But from my experience, adopting a more DIY approach to your art can actually allow you to pick up skills that will make it easier for you to communicate to the person you want to represent you. So there is a benefit at the end of it, even though it doesn't seem like it at the time. I used to book my own shows. I booked my own tours before. It is completely one of the worst jobs I think I've ever had to do. But it taught me a lot about how to speak to venues, how to negotiate what the guarantee would be or what the door deal would be like. So because I know all this information, when I speak to my booking agent now, we can have real conversations about things and understand what the expectations are. And it's a better working relationship than not knowing and having someone do the work for you. That's just an example of all the things. But once you pick up on like how to distribute an album or doing your social media posts and stuff, the more you know about your own business, the better you can ask somebody to help you run your business. Anybody else?
Most importantly, just keep making art. I know it can be discouraging a lot of times, when you're seeking the support and the momentum and the infrastructure behind it and want to grow your audience, but most importantly, keep making art, because that persistence is the only way that you're gonna know on the what the other side.
I know we have some more questions. I think that's a good place to wrap up. I think everyone's going to hang out for a minute here. So if you have further questions, please come talk to everyone here. But let's give it up again for all of our panelists. Thank you to Rising Arts Foundation for putting this together. Thank you to you all for these amazing questions. This was a pretty long, extensive conversation on a pretty technical topic, and everyone was so engaged. It's really amazing conversation. Thanks everyone watching the live stream. Again, I'm Joey with UMAW. Please go check out UMAW, become a member. It's weareumaw.org. If you're here, there's materials, support our efforts. This is also going to be edited down and then posted online if you'd like to refer back to anything from the conversation. The diagram we've been referring to is all the royalties. This was made by Jackie from UMAW. This is also this is also on the UMAW website for you to check out. And I think that is everything. Thanks so much, everyone.